there's a war underway, and we're in the midst of it. But the president has tied his own hands and wants to tie his hands even further with the authorization that he sent up here. I think it's time for the White House to develop an outline for the American people how we're going to address this worldwide terrorist threat, and to make sure that the president has the authorization to deal with it.
House Speaker John Boehner discussing the president's request for a resolution that would authorize the use of military force against ISIS. Welcome back to our final hour of America's Forum for this Friday. With Miranda Kahn at the anchor desk, J.D. Hayworth here. We're also joined by Rusty Humphries via Skype from out in the Arizona desert. And Miranda and Rusty, we should note that the president's plan is being heavily criticized by a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, even Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi said getting the proposal passed by Congress will be difficult.
Joining us now for an intelligence briefing, retired U.S. Major General Paul Vallely. Paul is Skyping in from Montana. We should note for the record that the general is currently the chairman of Stand Up America. Paul, as always, it is so good to have you here on America's Forum.
Thank you, J.D.
So, Paul, what about this request from the president to authorize the use of military force? What's your take on the language of that resolution?
Well, the language is circumspect, and that's why it's having so much problem in Congress with many questioning the verbiage in there, like putting a limitation on the duration of 3 years. You don't do that when you're developing a military strategy, national security strategy against a major threat such as ISIS. And many of the things, JD, I've talked about before need to be done covertly. We don't need to announce to the world and telegraph to the enemies what we're going to do or not do. It's important that all future operations not be discussed like that, but realize we are at war, and that we have to treat it that way. This is just not a news event anymore. We can't do these kinds of things.
General Rusty Humphries here. One of the things I've respected of you was your trips down to Guantanamo Bay. I've been there a number of times. Matter of fact, I think you met the warden there, one of my best friends, Colonel Mike Bumgarner. And you were just mentioning that we aren't treating this as a war. We haven't been treating this as a war for a long time. And it's absolutely shocking, isn't it, that we would release those detainees from Guantanamo knowing that they would go back to the battlefield.
Well, Rusty, yes, I have been down there several times, and had an opportunity to meet with not only the interrogators there, but a lot of the intelligence people based at Guantanamo. But certainly, when you talk about war detainees, I go back. We've been at war since 1979, since Khomeini came in from Paris into Tehran and took over and captured our hostages. This has been ongoing, and the threat to America has increased over the years. That's why, at Guantanamo, we cannot release these people back into what I call the wild of the jihadi movement. It's just ridiculous. But on the other hand, they should be tried, and if they're guilty, they should be imprisoned for whatever sentence they get. So we've got to continue to keep that facility, because we can't bring any more captured jihadis. We can't bring them into the United States and put them under our criminal court system.
General, I want to go back now to the president's plan. You mentioned that you didn't agree with a 3-year time frame. So does the president need to revise his plan in order for Congress to actually pass it?
And speaking of time, we got about a minute left here, Paul.
Well, he's not going to revise it. He's got his agenda with Valerie Jarrett and Susan Rice, and they have their agenda. I think it's totally inept. I think it puts America at great risk. We are at a crossroads here. Domestically, on the infiltration into the United States with cells. We're also threatened from ISIS in our embassies and assets that we have overseas. So we've got to have a strategy to win, and win quickly. We don't want to stretch this thing out forever, and that's what the thought is in Washington. They keep saying a long war. Let's not make it a long war. Let's bring the B-52s in. Let's have Joint Strike Force ground operations. Let's get the special ops on the ground with the targets and working with King Abdullah and others over there to destroy ISIS completely. That's what we need to do.
Paul, only about 15 seconds. In your estimation, is this 3-year request really more political, carrying it over to whomever succeeds Mr. Obama as commander-in-chief?
Well, I see it that way. It's political motivated. Everything Obama does is through a political prism, not a reality prism, JD.
Well, Major General Paul Vallely, we appreciate your perspective. In fact, we're going to ask you to stay with us. We will continue the conversation. Rusty Humphries, as you see there, from Arizona. Paul Vallely from Montana. Miranda Kahn and I here at the Newsmax TV anchor desk. And you, as America's Forum continues from Newsmax TV.
As the Houthi advances towards Sana'a took place, it simply became the case that they were unopposed in many cases. And that's something that we've got to try to find a better way as an intelligence community to understand the willingness of fighters to fight. Because when you match up orders of battle and read about the resources available to the various sides, you would look at that and say there's no way that might happen. But obviously it did. And it's left us in a position now where, on relatively short notice, just over the past few months, the security situation deteriorated far more rapidly than we expected.
I think that's the bureaucratic way to say we were taken by surprise. Nick Rasmussen, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, in congressional testimony. We are back to continue our conversation with Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth, our co-host, Rusty Humphries, Skyping in from the desert. And, of course, the gentleman with whom we are speaking is retired Army Major General Paul Vallely. And as we are dealing with this, Paul, I just have to ask you about what went down in Yemen. We have Marines there. We're supposed to evacuate in an orderly fashion. Is this a propaganda coup for the Houthi fighters in Yemen against the United States?
Well, it certainly is. Psychologically, it is a propaganda, but you can see with the destabilization there very, very quickly that the Marines, of course, were there to protect the embassy and its personnel, documents, and equipment. But I understand we left millions of dollars of equipment over there that they now have in their possession. This was all backed by Iran Revolutionary Guard advisors, and so on. But you can see that how serious this is as we go from North Africa to Yemen to Syria to Iraq, that this war gets more serious each day. You know what's a travesty? They separated the Marines over there from their weapons in a combat zone in a high-risk environment, or by order by the State Department. What are these people doing, JD? It's incredible.
And General, what do you think the U.S. needs to do to help them regain control?
I don't see any control back in Yemen other than what maybe the Saudis could do if they should choose to do that, because now that enemy of Saudi Arabia, Iran, is now more on their borders than ever as they control events in Yemen. So they're going to have to get off their you-know-what and do something about it, because they're right there. They've got plenty of equipment and aircraft and soldiers in the Saudi forces to do it. That's what's going to be interesting to see what they do or do not do. But I think as far as we're concerned with our lack of a plan to defeat and achieve victory, that we're basically out of the ball game there as we are in Libya.
General, here's what I don't understand. I see what's going on. I'm a guy, I've been to the war zones. My father was killed in Vietnam, so I understand the sacrifices. What I don't get, and it's not just Obama, when we get into wars, we don't seem to want to win them. If 3 years? No, we should go in there, and like you said in the last segment, we should go and try to kill things, kill people, break things, and get the war over. Why do we want to take all of this time and waste all of our treasure in blood and not just win it?
Rusty, that's a great question. I've pondered that so many times since Vietnam, and having spent 2 tours over there in Vietnam, probably about the same time maybe your father was there. And I was an aide to the field commander in Vietnam when we were getting direction from the White House in McNamara, what we could hit, what we could not hit. There was no plan for victory. It was a plan for appeasement, and that's what happened in the Paris peace talks. And we continued on since then, since World War II, not achieving victory except for a few places where we go in, where Reagan went in and put the fear of you know who into Gaddafi at the time. And we went into some of the other areas in the Caribbean, as you may remember. But certainly Reagan was for victory and victory in the Cold War. But other than that, we have seen a lack of leadership in the White House and a really stand-up position of our Joint Chiefs of Staff in the military to make sure if we're going to put our assets in jeopardy, our personnel, then we have to go in with a plan and a victory plan and to end war as soon as possible. As Sun Tzu said, extending a war benefits nobody, and we've got to go back to the basics of strategy, victory, and how we win wars when we put our armed forces out there.
General, we only have about 20 seconds. Do you agree with me? If we're not going to go in there and win it, don't go in there at all.
Well, I've said this with to JD on the air. I had an infinity, or not an infinity, what did I say? Some kind of revelation. But it is infinity now almost. But, you know, if we don't have a sound plan for victory, I would not shed one more ounce of human blood in the Middle East if we don't go in with the idea and a plan and strategy to win and win early. That's what we've got to do. We can't put our people in any more jeopardy unless we give them the full support.
And
for a better commander-in-chief.
that's right. General Paul Vallely and Rusty Humphries, we thank you both. Coming back with more right after this.